Welcome to the Encouragement Engineering Podcast. We help people to combat the negativity that inundates our daily lives with a positive perspective and positive action. Today's guest is Robyn Sears. Our guest today has conquered unexpected challenges, emerging stronger from teenage parenthood, divorce, and delayed entry into the workforce. And inspired by incredible mentors, she is passionate about uplifting and empowering single mothers who need support and highlighting the organizations that serve them. Armed with an executive coaching diploma from Emory University and pursuing a positive intelligence certification and a podcast host, Robyn is a founder of Above and Not Beneath. She coaches single mothers around the world to control the inner critic that looks at challenges through the lens of gifts and opportunities. So please welcome to the show, Robyn Sears. Robyn, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Bob. I'm excited to be here.
Well, great. Why don't you tell people a little bit about you and how you got to where you are?
Yeah, so quite the journey, right? I think that's pretty much the same for all of us. Life is takes us on a lot of twists and turns, but yeah, I was a first-time mother at 17.
Okay.
And got married, and I don't generally recommend that course of action. It's it's a pretty tough road, but a lot of good things also came out of that experience. I have three incredible children, and my daughter and she and her husband are expecting their first baby here right before Christmas. Thank you. So very excited about that. And was married for 17 years, and we were two kids learning how to be adults, right?
Yeah.
And it was a disaster, and there were a lot of good and some difficult things coming out of that. But I think what the experiences taught me, I had the privilege of being a stay-at-home mom during that time. We had our parents helped us, and anyway, but I didn't enter into the workforce until I was in my early 30s.
Right.
And I found myself divorced with three kids, elementary school, middle school, high school. So, and then needing to support them.
Yeah.
And just kind of finding like, what am I doing? How am I going to do this? This is, I have a lot of skills, but they weren't necessarily traditional work skills.
Right.
And so learning how to translate that into a productive career where I could support my kids, it was a journey, but I was fortunate enough to have an incredible boss. I worked for a gentleman, he and his wife, they were entrepreneurs.
Okay.
And truly mentored me. And for the first time in a very long time, I learned how to believe in myself.
Wow.
And to trust my intuition and to laugh at my mistakes.
Right.
And I had been very serious and rigid before then because I was a young mom and I had to do things a certain way because I wanted people to take me seriously.
Right.
And the world does not take young mothers seriously. So I needed to act older than I was. And so he really helped me to learn how to laugh at myself and to not take myself so seriously and to see the humor in tough situations. Yeah. And so it was really a really incredible positive situation. He and his wife were just and still are just incredible human beings. And so that inspired me to continue this journey of really learning about coaching and mentoring and pursuing some education and certifications in that. And I worked for an organization where I had the privilege of coaching clients in how to work with virtual assistants before being a virtual anything was a thing, pre-pandemic days when everybody was like, what's Zoom?
Yeah.
And before, where we wish we all had stock in it,
Yeah. Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah. Now Zoom wants everybody to come back to the office.
Right. It's a crazy conundrum that. So I really learned a lot in that journey and continue to be able to pour into not only my clients, but also other team members and became kind of a coach to some of the team. So I went to Emory to get an executive coaching certification, really learned a lot about the neurology of emotion and the physical and mental and emotional connection.
Okay.
And that was also part of my healing journey. Sort of during this time period, I was full-time caregiver to my mother as well as she was
Wow.
passing. And so trying to work full time and juggle and care
Yeah.
for my mother. And my husband and I are crazy house renovators, and we were renovating a home. I mean, it was like this trifecta
Let's load
storm,
up the plate, shall we?
Yeah, it was like this trifecta crazy storm that happened, but such a blessing to be able to care for my mother. And I would not
Yeah.
trade a day of it.
Mhm.
So much good came out of that, even though it was incredibly hard.
Yeah.
I'm so grateful for the situation. But and my mother was a huge inspiration in my life and just a very kind and encouraging individual. And that's kind of what, just sort of this conglomeration of life and events propelled me to really want to help other women who are in the situation I was in. Being a single mother is incredibly difficult. It's
Right.
lonely. Community can be really difficult. You
Mm.
end up losing. What I found is that I lost a lot of friends when I got divorced. It was almost
Mhm.
like people felt like it was contagious.
Mm.
Or they were like, I was awkward. Like, who do we pick? It's like, you don't have
Right.
to pick
You
anyone,
don't have to
right?
pick sides. Yeah.
And you don't have to pick sides, right? We
Yeah.
can all be friends here. But I really became inspired to help women who have gone through a similar situation really learn how to believe in themselves again,
Mhm.
how to look at their skill set in a different way, and how to kind of get out of their own heads
Yeah.
and recognize like the stories that we tell ourselves, they're not the truth,
Yeah.
right?
Well, if we can, let's jump off on that point right there, because that's a critical one. I mean, we always tell ourselves, it seems that society tells ourselves negative things first.
Yeah.
Why do you think we do that? Is it easier? Is it just because we're not in a good spot? What is it that makes us go to the negative first? I mean, why don't we're creations of God? Why don't we go to that and start with that and build on that?
Yeah, I think that's the $1 million question. But I think psychologically, like we're actually designed that way,
Okay.
right? We have this negative
Yeah.
predisposition, and it takes a lot of effort to be able to retool that, right? We have these neurons in
Yeah.
our neuro pathways. We have to actually build new ones to change our thinking. Right. So we
Yeah.
automatically go to the negative. And what I have learned and experienced by additional spiritual practices, I fully believe that I'm God created me,
Yeah.
and I'm a unique individual, but we all struggle with a lot of the same things.
Yeah.
Um, but he also gave me a gift in that I have a lot of tools and resources that I was created with to help me change my thinking, to reduce stress, and to be able to shift my perspective.
You say that again. I mean, I just want to make sure everybody hears that. Did you hear that? We're gonna play this. Stop a minute and just rewind that, because that was good information.
Yeah, we do like our breath is powerful, right?
Yeah.
It can literally, if you pause and actually allow your body to take a full, deep breath and hold it and let it slowly out, it changes the chemical composition in your body.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? It releases other chemicals that are incredibly helpful. And so learning like, what is my body feeling? What am I thinking? These two are directly related.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so if I can start to change my thinking or recognize what my body is feeling faster, I can change my thought process.
Right. Right.
And that's like, oh, it's so easy. Snap your fingers and boom, it's done. No,
No.
it's a practice. I don't think anybody has it down to perfection. And I recognized myself this morning that I woke up and I thought, I have not been spending enough time, it's self-care or whatever,
Right. Right.
actually doing my own breathing.
Right.
And I love to spend time outside. I live in a very wooded area, and the Japanese call it forest bathing.
Right. Right.
And
Yes, I've heard that. Yes.
yeah,
And
um,
it's helpful.
it is incredibly helpful, and just to sit in the silence and enjoy like the birds and what have you. It doesn't have to be hours long, right? Like you can benefit from this in just a couple of minutes.
Yeah. It's interesting as you were saying that. I don't know if you noticed when you were talking about it, you were slowing down.
Yeah.
And I try to tell people, we live in a microwave society. We really need to learn how to slow down because our world is a crock pot world. It's not
Sure.
going to happen in seconds. And we've got to take the time, even though we want to do this fast, take the time, take a few minutes. Maybe it's a few minutes in the morning, a few minutes in the afternoon, a few minutes in the evening. Take just a few minutes and take that time. And you bring up a great point on that. It's a perspective of how do you see these things? I think that's so important because that goes into the idea of I think what you're talking about with positive intelligence, and if you could give us that if you will, that definition and how that might relate to shifting that mindset to seeing things a little more positively in our world.
Yeah, I think if I could sum it up, positive intelligence is learning to recognize your body, your thoughts, and your emotions,
Hmm.
and the intersection between the three. So the Shirzad Shermain, he's the developer of positive intelligence, and he calls that sort of the sage side of your being,
Okay.
right? And it lives, so positive intelligence, the sage, it lives in kind of that region of your brain, the prefrontal cortex, where you can make rational, calm, clear-headed decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And the saboteur, which is sort of what he calls the negative thinking part of it, it lives, in lives in that, that brainstem that likes to
Yeah.
tell you, it triggers your fight, flight, freeze, and fawn reactions. But there's a correlation. Your heart might start beating faster if you're sort of in that mode. Your mind starts to spin a little faster. You tell yourself more stories. And it's about recognizing what's happening in my body and how can I put the kibosh on that. Like, oh, no, 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 we're not going to think that way
Right.
because there's another way to think. So let's take a couple of deep breaths. He calls them PQ reps. And it's
Okay.
it's literally, it's like 90 seconds to 2 minutes.
Hmm.
And it is literally just taking a couple of deep breaths, becoming very, very hyper aware of how your body is sitting in a seat, feeling your sit bones in the seat, feeling the weight of your clothing,
Hmm.
really
Okay.
intensely noticing the person maybe sitting, maybe you're in a meeting and it's getting tense. Well,
Mm-hmm.
really just taking a couple deep breaths and really noticing the person across from you. Oh, I never really noticed that the color of their eyes was, that they had a gold ring around their iris. I never noticed that. And so you can practice this anywhere to calm the central nervous system, take a couple of deep breaths and put your mind in a place where you can absorb the big picture, become clear-headed, become creative,
Right.
and understand maybe the perspective of somebody else.
And that's a great point because so many times we're thinking, what's in, the WIIFM, what's in it for me? What am I going to
Yes.
get out of this? How is this going to benefit me? Oh, hold on a second. There's more than just us in this world. This world has billions of people.
Yep.
And we could just realize that other person across the table may want the same thing we want,
Yeah.
safety, community, peace of mind. You know, why not look into that? That's a great point with that.
Yeah. And it's less about, we're always, when we're, in a dialogue or maybe in a difficult conversation, we're always thinking about what we are going to say next.
Yes.
And we're not listening. And when we're in that fight or flight mode, it literally shuts off your ears. You can't hear. You can't think about what the other person is saying. And
Right.
so when you shift your perspective and sort of this sage, like I'm going to really listen to what this person is saying to me. And maybe they're emotional and that's okay. But those emotions don't have to be your emotions,
Right. Right.
right? You
Right.
don't have to react to their emotional state, but you can really hear what they're saying when you're sort of shifting into this. I'm actually going to be clear headed in this moment. It's a
And if
choice.
we and if we can, let's go into that next phrase because you started on it and I thought you were going to finish it. The reactor response.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, tell us about that because I talk about that a lot myself. That's so
Yeah,
critical in our life. If you could expand on that a little bit for people.
sure. I mean, I think the difference between reacting, responding, it's a second, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I do still, I kind of go back to this. It's going to be, repetitious, but in that moment, your physical body is telling you something,
Yeah.
right? You might feel it in your chest. Your shoulders might tense up. I notice it for myself. Like all of a sudden my shoulders become earrings, right? Like they're like way up here. My back is hunched and like I've got
Yeah.
this,
Right. Yeah. You
crease
get
between my
this. Yeah.
eyebrows that Botox does not help. It is, and so when I recognize that, I'm like, why are my shoulders earrings? Okay, I'm
Yeah.
reacting. No. I need to take a deep breath,
Mhm.
listen to what the other person is saying, and then maybe even say to them, I heard you say XYZ. Am I hearing you correctly?
Right. It's a good point. That's a good one
Because
because,
that gives you a
yeah.
minute to then choose how you're going to respond.
Right. Well, you open yourself up to listening too. Make
Mm-hmm.
sure you're stating that, am I hearing this right? So now you want to make sure you are hearing it right.
Yeah,
It gives you that minute to adjust your perspective of what's coming.
for
Um,
sure. Yeah.
I often relate that to when you're driving, that reactor response. And you get home and you wonder why you're so tight and all that because
Yeah.
and you don't need to do that. And it's a lesson I teach myself all the time. Breathe, just breathe, just breathe.
Just breathe. Just
It's,
breathe. Yeah.
I don't know what they're going through. They could be going to the hospital. They could be in bigger hurry than I am. Um, you know, let it be. It's just,
Let it be.
yeah.
That's right. That's right. And I think something that we don't do in society is assume the
Yes.
positive intents from other people. And, somebody's like misbehaving in traffic, that's on them.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, you don't have to react to that. You know, my husband and I are very different drivers. I'm like, I'm just going to get in the right lane and just tootle down the road and, listen to my podcast or what have you, and enjoy the ride. If I need to
Right.
pass somebody, I will, but I am not going to whip in
Yeah.
and out of traffic and cause my own stress, which
Right.
is what we do. As humans, we tend to cause a lot of our,
Mhm.
our own distress.
Ancient Chinese secret there. Yeah.
Little distress there.
Yeah, it is. It's always something that, they say most of the cures of people in a hospital could be self-cured if they learn to relax and respond differently to many things.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's interesting too that I appreciate what you do with the people you help because you talk about, you know, and with your website and your podcast name, and above, not being below, right?
Above and not beneath.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. Thank you. Um, and it shows the positive side.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
obviously that's intentional for marketing purposes, I think, but it seems like there's more to it. Is there?
There is. Yeah. There is. My mother goes back to my mother, and it's sort of an honor and a tribute to her. And growing up, my mom, just a very spiritual woman, and she would pray over my sister and I, and she would say this prayer, and it was sort of like a conglomeration of a couple of different Bible verses. And it's, "You are the head and not the tail, you are above and not beneath, and blessed are the fruits of your labors."
Wow.
And so whenever I was kind of in this really tough spot, maybe I was like beating myself up and like all that negative self-talk, I would remember my mom saying that to me. No, 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 you are the head and not the tail. You are
Mhm.
above and not beneath. And you will be blessed. Maybe not today,
Right.
but at some point, there's a lesson in the hard, right? I think the
Yes.
message there is there's a lesson in the hard. Hindsight's 2020, right? We can't
Yeah.
see the lesson in the middle. I said
No.
to my daughter the other day, she was going through something hard, and I said, well, there's like a blessing in this. And she was like, shut up, mom. I was like, you're right. You're right. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Too soon. Too soon. Too
Yeah.
soon. But
But
it just stems from that. It just stems from realizing that we are what we say to ourselves, words matter. So what we say to
yes.
ourselves matters. And so that's sort of where that came from.
And that's a good reminder too, because so many times there's always something we're gonna have to overcome.
Yeah.
And personally, I think that'd be a great T-shirt slogan. But just the whole thing, and a good reminder for people. We need to be able to overcome stuff that's going to come at us, and it will come at us. As I heard a pastor say one time, you're either coming into a storm or you're coming out of a storm. But either way, you're
Right.
going through something. We
That's
all
right.
are.
Yeah.
How are we gonna, ride that wave? it sounds like you've learned to be able to help people do that a lot. So,
Yeah.
that's something that you empower people to do. What's something that when things get out of control, what's a way to help control that?
Yeah. Gosh. I think there's a couple things. And I mean, as a person of faith, I lean on my faith, right?
Hmm.
Um, and I have a couple of spiritual practices that I do try to do every day. It
Yeah.
doesn't always happen, but I try. That I think are helpful to kind of pull back and give me that 30,000 foot view of like, what is this? And I think also reflecting on the past, I think previous storms help prepare you for the next storm and it builds that resilience muscle.
Yeah. It's like working
Um,
out.
yeah, it's totally like
Yeah.
working out. Exactly. It is exactly like going to the gym.
Yeah.
But you don't often remember how victorious you are now
Yeah.
without looking at the past,
Hmm.
right? History is a fantastic teacher. And one of the most powerful exercises I have done in the course of a lot of my training, it's a reframing exercise.
Okay.
And so I went back and just thought about throughout the course of my life, starting from a very young age, and just journaled key highlights, just the points that really stuck out. And a lot of them were very hard.
Hmm.
And really just kind of wrote a couple of sentences about what was so hard about it. What was I thinking at the time, feeling at the time? And then going back through and looking at that, it's like, okay, but what did I learn from that season of my life?
Wow. Okay.
And that allowed me to set down some very heavy baggage that I have been carrying around for a long period of time in my life. So much so, like I was working with an executive coach, and I left a position, and I was kind of trying to figure out what I was going to do next. And I was working with this executive coach, and I was telling him this about this season that I had at a company that I worked with. It was really difficult, and there was, just some toxicity in the organization, and I chose to leave. And so I talked about it once, I talked about it twice, I talked about it three times, and like the third session, he said, "Stop."
Yeah.
And I was like, "What?" He said, "You've told me this story three times." And I was like, "I have?" And he was like, "Yes." And I was like, "I'm sorry." And he's like, "No, what I want you to recognize here is that you are carrying a bag. You are
Yeah.
carrying baggage around. And if you don't let that baggage go, it's going to stay with you and pollute everything you do in the future."
Wow.
And when he said that, I stopped and my eyes got big and I started thinking, and I took a really big deep breath. And in my mind, I visualized myself holding, those like
Mhm.
ancient
Yeah.
suitcases that are super heavy, the big
Yeah.
boxy ones that, like, how did people travel with these things? And in my mind, I envisioned myself letting them go, and I could hear the kerthunk on the floor,
Right.
and then taking steps forward and thinking, I just left that behind me.
Hmm.
So now let's think about that experience. And what did I learn from working at this organization? I learned a lot that I could
Right.
be grateful for. And I met some incredible people who are still very dear friends of mine today. So the positive actually outweighed the negative, but I was fixated on the negative
Right.
until
Right.
I went back and I did a deep dive into that and started to peel the onion. I was like, the problem is me and what I'm thinking.
Right. Your perspective of it. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Wow.
it was incredibly helpful.
That's awesome. That is great. And we got to remember that in our society. So many times I talk about that same concept. Quit carrying that bag around. And I'll take a big bag and sling it over your back and I arch over, and you can feel it as you see what I do. And then you drop that, and that thump, that hard, letting it go. People got to remember that that can ease up your back. It can ease up your mind. It can ease up your heart. So,
It absolutely can. Yeah.
well, great reminders there, Robyn. Where can people, let's make sure we get the information to them. Where can they get a hold of you, your website, all that, so we make sure they can follow you and listen to your podcast as well.
Sure. It's abovenotbeneath.org. Also on Instagram, you can find me there, the same Above Not Beneath Coach. So you can find me in those two locations. And you can always send me an email, Robyn at abovenotbeneath.org. And that's Robyn with a Y. Sorry, I
Yes.
should caveat that.
Well, we'll make sure we get that all in the show notes because we want people to be able to have this resource. Sounds like you're doing a great job. Keep up the great work with what you're doing. I appreciate your positivity in this world. We need the extra light. We need the help, and we need to let people realize they can get rid of that extra baggage.
Yeah, they absolutely can, Bob. And I think you're doing great work too. You can
Thank
never
you.
encourage too much.
No, I try not to. I want to keep it out there. We need it in our world.
Yeah,
So
we sure
keep up
do.
the great work, Robyn. And thank you for being a guest on the Encouragement Engineering podcast. I really appreciate your time today.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Great. Thank you.